So my drug of choice changed throughout the years. I guess my first one was weed. Started as a teenager, drinking and smoking weed like a lot of teenagers do. The drinking though, right off the bat, was kind of insane. So I grew up watching my uncles drink, and I kind of idolized them in a way and looked up to them. So I was kind of like, I couldn't wait till I got old enough to where I could drink too. But once I got, as a teenager, every time I drank, I got blackout drunk. I just never could control that aspect of it. So after weed, it did turn into alcohol for a while. It was pretty bad. That lasted for quite a few years. That is one thing that had a major effect on me. And plus, I would go and see him every other weekend or whatever and spend some time with him and his side of the family. At that time, I also had an overbite, and I would be made fun of for that. And so as I got older and I'm going through adolescence, I kind of wanted to change that image. And so I was trying to shed the church boy image. I started listening to different music. And then once I was finally in a position where I could get my hands on some drugs, I did those. My first time smoking weed, I was at my buddy's house, and I had known about drugs for a while and had been wanting to try some of those. And one of his buddies was there, and he was like, "Y'all want to smoke?" And we were like, "Yeah." And so we went to the parking lot of the YMCA, and we smoked some and went in there and went swimming. First time drinking, I was at my buddy's house, and he had some liquor. I think it was Jim Beam or Jack Daniels. It was god awful. That was nasty. That was a double shot, and I took one, and I was like, okay. Well, it was 2 or 3 minutes later, and I was like, I don't really feel anything that much yet. And so I took another one, and then I took 2 more and smoked some weed, and then I went in the neighbor's yard and passed out in their backyard. It was during the day too. It was like 5 o'clock. I guess you could say I quit drinking by switching to another drug, which was pain medications. Of course, was huge here in Appalachia, the opioid epidemic and all that. And so I started using prescription pain medication, and then at the age of 24, I began IV drug use. That lasted about 11 years before I finally came here to Huntington for recovery. It went from pain pills to eventually methamphetamine, and heroin and fentanyl. The last few years that I was out there using, it was methamphetamines mostly. That was my drug of choice. That's when things got the worst, I guess you could say. I was homeless, and kind of day to day it was just survival. When you see someone struggling with substance use, you never think that's going to be you, because growing up you hear about all the hard drugs, the worst ones to stay away from, like heroin and crack and this and that. And then what I've found along my journey, looking back on it, in terms of how I got there, was like a series of compromises that you make with yourself. It's like, oh, I can try this just this one time, or cocaine, you hear about it, but it's not that bad because it's not crack. And then there's some times where I got tricked into smoking some crack because they said it was something else, and I didn't know any better. So when you're on meth, you're up for days. So if I slept, it was probably for a really long time. You wake up and feel horrible because you slept for like 24 hours straight. You're withdrawing because you don't have anything. Your dopamine levels, like the normal people's are around here on an average day, and yours is like way down here. So you wake up and you're just kind of feeling completely terrible. There's no way to really explain it to make people understand unless you've been there, because It's worse than a cold, it's worse than the flu, it's just awful. Your mouth is kind of like, it feels like it has a film on it almost, because you've been sleeping for so long. You wake up and it feels worse than if you had not gotten enough sleep. It was like that times 10. Drugs always came first. Throughout my substance use and throughout everyone's that ends up where I was at, the drugs kind of hijack your brain. And so usually for a person, shelter and food and things like that are like at the top of their list. Drugs become more than that. Your days are spent figuring out how to get more drugs, doing drugs, and then eventually, of course, you have to eat. One winter, I stayed in an abandoned trailer, and so in this trailer, people had like scrapped some of the walls for scrap metal, so like there was no barrier to the outside, and there would be snow on the ground, and I would have 3 blankets in there, and you would kind of just curl up into a ball and tuck the sides under you, and as you breathed into it, it kept you kind of warm, and you were able to sleep. And then I remember one time, it was so cold and I couldn't find anywhere to go. I knew there was a trailer that was being worked on, and so I broke into that trailer just to go in there and get warm and sleep. Day to day was just survival. I did do a lot of couch surfing though. I told you the worst parts of it. A lot of couch surfing. I knew a lot of people. People liked me. I was allowed into people's homes, even at my worst, because most people knew that as bad as I was not going to steal off of them. I was just sick of being homeless and sick of just surviving, and so I went to my sister's house because she lives, I'm talking way out in the boonies. Like, she's in the middle of nowhere. You have to go way up in a holler. There's nothing near her house. And so I went there thinking I'm going to get through the withdrawals and like try to get my life together, and that lasted a few days until I took off walking from her house. You can talk somebody into giving you some drugs. And so I walked to my buddy's house and ended up trading him, I think it was a cell phone that I had. It was an old crappy one. Traded him, and I just, as bad as I wanted to, I could not do it on my own. And then that led to eventually going to treatment. In 2019, I went to treatment for the first time here at Recovery Point. The only thing I knew about treatment at that time was what I saw on TV. I didn't know anything about the 12 steps or really anything. But on TV, you see celebrities, they're at these treatment facilities that have a pool. And I was like, I could probably do that for a while. I figured it might be co-ed, I don't know. Then I got to Recovery Point, and it was nothing like that. I walked in the door and I had my cell phone out at the front desk, and I was like, do y'all have Wi-Fi? And they were like, oh, you can't have a phone while you're here. And they took my phone. And then that night I'm laying back in detox, kind of thinking, what did I get myself into? Once someone drops you off at treatment, they're highly unlikely to just come back and get you from treatment, and so I was kind of stuck here. You start off in detox, which it's not a medical detox, you're just kind of laying back there in bed, and like, you don't have to do any of the program elements, you just have to chill out until you feel better. I started the program, and where I was used to sleeping whenever I wanted and as long as I wanted, this was more military based, and so the lights come on at 5:30 in the morning every day. Your feet have to be on the floor by 6, and that was an extremely difficult part of the program. So you get up, you do chores, you eat breakfast, and then You have classes and meetings throughout the day. I really enjoyed the classes and the meetings. I liked that part of it. I thought it was pretty cool. I also thought it was cool that everyone was just supporting each other. It was kind of a different environment, I guess, than surviving day to day. This was considered the hardest program in West Virginia. That intrigued me. That made me want to complete the program even more. And so I was into it. I got through the first part of the program and moved into the second part of the program, where you still get up early every day and stuff on the weekends and all, but you start, they give you a job. So in that part of the program, you work in the kitchen, and so you have to be in there at 4:30 in the morning. You're cooking food and stuff all day until 5 o'clock in the evening. You sleep when you can, and when you sleep, you sleep as soon as you hit the mattress. Then you start, after that part of the program, you start getting more and more freedom. So I lasted 4 months that first time. And then I started letting myself think about getting high. So the first two part of the programs, you're busy all day long. You don't have time to think about getting high. The third part of the program, you kind of do. You get more freedom. I was like, I'm leaving. I'll come back eventually. And I was in Huntington for 2 days, just kind of had a return to use, until I ran into a staff member at Recovery Point as I was making my way down the street. He started talking to me. I really didn't want to talk to him because I was high. I was with somebody else. Once you leave, you're supposed to not be able to come back for 30 days. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, in 30 days I'm going to come back and this and that. Just trying to say whatever and be on my way. And he was like, if you could go back right now, would you? And I was like, yeah, if I could go back right now, I would. That was a lie. But he got on the phone, and then he was like, hop in the truck. I was like, oh, you mean like now? So back I go to Recovery Point again. I was there for like 3 more months. 3 months, 3.5 more months. That whole second time, I was like waging a war against myself the entire time, because half the time I wanted to be there. The other half of the time, I just wanted to find a ride back home so I could return to the life I was living. Eventually, I left. I ended up running around Huntington for like a week or two, doing a whole bunch of drugs. I ended up in a sober living house until I eventually left there too. Got back to Oceana. And that entire summer, I did probably more drugs than I've ever done in my life. Overdosed twice for the first time. The second time I overdosed, I was like, I'm gonna die in a small town, and I've never done a single thing with my life. I didn't complete high school, I never completed anything. And as I mentioned earlier, Recovery Point being so hard intrigued me, and that was the one thing on my bucket list at that time. Was I always kept it in my mind that I was going to go back and finish that program if it was the end of me. I decided to make my third and final trip to Recovery Point. This time I was ready. I was like, as soon as I went, my mind was made. I was like, yeah, this is it. It becomes a little bit real that, okay, I'm thinking about changing my life here. I've been living this way for 2 decades. This is all I know. And it is terrifying. Going to Recovery Point was terrifying because I'd been chasing drugs since the age of 15. I was 36, I think, my first time. This was during COVID. So when I went back, was in quarantine. They put you in quarantine for 3 weeks before you start the program. It's like quarantine, detox combined. You're with all the people that will then start the program together. And so that was the most miserable 3 weeks of the program. I'm withdrawing off Suboxone. The only thing I could find that helped was taking a hot shower, so I took like 4 or 5 hot showers a day. There was nothing to do. You're sitting in that room watching movies and whatever. They do bring you a lot of snacks. And then I started the program, did all the stuff that I told you before, and as I'm going through the program, alumni of the program come back in and they give their lead, and well, when they give their lead, they're telling their story. And they're all doing stuff like this, and I was like, I could probably do that. If they can do it, I can do it. And so I started formulating this plan to where I was like, I'm going to work in recovery too. So when you get to the end of the program, the last 3 months, you can either choose to go in the sober living house where you get a job and pay rent and all that, or you can go into the peer mentor's office where you basically run the program. You teach class and work with the people newer to the program. And I decided I was going to do that. So going into the peer mentor's office, I let it be known that I was coming for that position. I wanted that. And so 2 weeks into the office, they made me supervisor and did that until I finished the program. I decided my next goal was I'm going to start working there. So I completed the program. The same day I started working there as a program monitor overnight. I did that for 3 weeks until they moved me to a new position working 8 to 4 Monday through Friday, doing the DHHR, as it was known at that time, benefits. And so I handled all the DHHR benefits for like 100 and some clients at a time. I was in charge of the food stamp cards and the Medicaid and the whole nine. Then they put me in charge of the mail because something happened where someone's mail got stolen and it had like a credit card offer in it and someone filled it out. And so I was the only person in that building allowed to touch the mail. And then I started doing the intakes. So people new to the program, I would do their intake. I did what's called quality of life surveys that you give clients every so often. And so I'm doing all this and get my GED in that time too. I became a peer recovery support specialist. So for like 11 months, I worked DHHR from 8 to 4, and then I would clock out from program side, clock into behavioral health side, and do peer support from 4 to 10 during the week. Then I was thinking, you can only really take this so far. My brain always goes to, I want to do the most. If I want to do something, I want to go to the highest level. And so I was like, I need to go to college. And at first I was thinking psychology. And then as I'm talking to my worker with Jobs and Hope, which is another program that helps people in recovery, she was like, what you really want to do from what you're explaining to me is social work. And I was like, of course it's social work. Why wouldn't it be? Everyone in my family is social workers. They tried to talk me into going to Mount West first, and like I said, my brain goes to, I gotta do the biggest and the best. And so I was like, I'm gonna go to Marshall first. I'm gonna skip Mount West and just do my whole 4 years at Marshall. And so I applied, and then I got accepted, and the nerves started to set in because I'm like, I'm gonna be sitting in these classes with people way younger than me. I was like 38, I think. It was exciting too though, and no matter how much I was terrified of being in class with 18 and 19-year-olds, that was not going to stop me. So I came and started the classes. Kind of some of the classes I was in, I was talking to the other students that were in there, and I was talking about my fears of being there and how I thought it was weird, and they were kind of like, we just think it's cool that you made it here. and they made me feel comfortable. And then, of course, the collegiate recovery program too. I instantly got involved with that. Over the next 4 years, I worked myself up to the position I'm in now with collegiate recovery and graduated highest honor, summa cum laude. Last summer, I was able to figure out how to keep going to the gym, and I slowly started doing some cardio too. So I graduated in December, decided I was going to train for this marathon in addition to my weightlifting, and so I go to the rec center and weightlift 4 days a week, 2 hours each of those days. And then I run. I have like 4 runs that I do per week. So Saturday, I go to the rec center and weightlift, come home, eat. Sometimes I'll take a nap and then I'll go for a run. And then same thing on Sunday. Monday, I wake up, come here to work, go home, eat, take a nap, get up, go for a run. Tuesday, same thing, only instead of going for a run, I go to the rec center for 2 hours. Same thing on Wednesday. Thursday, I do my long run, so that's like at least 2 hours or more. And outside of that, there's a lot of conferences and stuff that I go to. People that stigmatize it still see it as like this person can never get better, or they see people that have had multiple attempts at recovery that have not succeeded yet, and they're like, they'll never get it. Or they see, so the most visible people you see with substance use are people at the lower socioeconomic status. You don't see the people mostly that are like way up here that are well off, or they can function in their substance use. And so, like I said, the most people you see are at the bottom. And people kind of make fun of that sometimes, or like they'll say things to people that they see on the streets to make them feel worse about themselves. My life is just like anyone else's anymore. I just, I don't really think about doing drugs or have the urge to do drugs. I will say the one thing I do have the urge to do on a rare occasion it'll cross my mind. I think it would be nice to have a joint every once in a while. I ain't gonna do that. If it wasn't for a supportive community, I would never be here right now. And so by stigmatizing people with substance use disorder, you're only making the problem worse. You're only making the problem bigger. You could be deterring someone from getting help, especially if you make them feel like, oh, we don't believe in you, we don't think you'll ever change, or this and that, and then maybe they will never change because you've sit here and deterred them from getting the help that they need. If you're early into recovery, I would say build those connections with people that you are around and build that support group. That's going to be the biggest thing to help you along the way. What do you have to lose? That's the way I looked at it. I didn't have anything to lose because I was already lost everything that I'd ever, well, I didn't really ever have a whole lot, but I was at the bottom, didn't have anything. Support group is huge. Figuring out which recovery pathway you want to take, because there's a whole bunch of different ones. There's 12-step, there's smart recovery, there's there's medication for opioid use disorder. So figuring out which pathway you want to take. After you have those conversations, whenever you decide to take that step, just try to overcome those fears. Hopefully someone has like family or someone that can support them along the way. Thinking about how much better the world would be if we all just support each other a little bit more. because we've talked about substance use and recovery right now, but if we could expand that to every person and every population, imagine how much better the world would be. And that's like every marginalized population that you can think of, especially right now as some of those are under attack. Yeah, I would say more supportive all around.